What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to be continuing our Hidden Gems series in today's video with the quarterback position on Madden 23. And in Madden 23, there's not going to be a ton of Hidden Gem quarterbacks, but the first group to start off with is going to be the Miami Dolphins quarterback room. There's a reason for this. That is that this entire quarterback room is very much up in the air. If anybody that is a Dolphins fan joins into your franchise, they may be looking to move Tua Tagovailoa, and Tua is a player that you could certainly utilize as a franchise quarterback if you really stick to developing him correctly. He's only 24 years old. He's a 75 overall. He's got some decent athleticism at that 82 speed. His throw power is going to be very low, however, so that's an unfortunate side effect of everybody seeing the clips of him underthrowing balls and stuff like that. I really don't think his arm is as bad as everybody says it is, but Tua Tagovailoa is a really good candidate. Outside of him, though, we also have Teddy Bridgewater, who is going to be a nice plug-and-play quarterback if you're a team that is QB needy. Again, he has a little bit of mobility there. He is 29 years old, but I did want to leave him on this list because grouping these guys together, one or the other, if not both, will be up for trade in most franchises. Your next entry on this list is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles quarterbacks. And again, this is going to depend on what the Philadelphia Eagles are looking to do in your franchise. I've heard some talks that there are some people that don't really like Jalen Hurts as their quarterback there, and that's a potential possibility. I would say it's a very low possibility that you would ever be able to get Jalen Hurts off of this team, considering his very good athleticism, pretty good size, 24 years old, 74 overall. But if you can't get a guy like that off of the team, you can get one of the better prospects that are out here that may potentially hit the practice squad this year or just free agency in general in Carson Strong. He's a 22-year-old rookie, 58 overall with 71 speed. So he's not going to be an athlete for you, but he will be a pretty good buildable prospect, all things considered. You could take him and build him into a franchise quarterback as long as you're starting him early in your franchise mode. It's going to take a lot of effort for him to get there, but with Jalen Hurts above him, this team certainly doesn't need Carson Strong, and chances are good that he's going to be available for you and not for a very expensive price. The third entry onto this list is going to be the Atlanta Falcons quarterbacks, and that is going to be split between Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota, as well as Felipe Franks. These are all players that you could utilize for different roles within a franchise mode to a great extent of effectiveness. So Marcus Mariota is going to be one of those plug-and-play type of players. I feel like he has the potential for his overall to go up, considering he's probably going to be their quarterback this year, and I think he's going to play pretty well. So you might want to look at him in later franchises that are starting with updated rosters and things like that, because I think Marcus Mariota deserves more of a mid to high 70s rating and much more along the lines of a Teddy Bridgewater type of a player where you could certainly plug and play him and he's got top tier athleticism at the position. Next, you have the rookie Desmond Ridder. Chances are they're not trading him away, but certainly want to be aware of what's going on with this team because Desmond Ridder at 23 years old with 88 speed and a 70 overall is a really good young prospect. And then Felipe Franks is going to be one of the harder builds that you could have, but he's a player that you could bring into the fold and use as a serviceable quarterback or build up to be a serviceable quarterback, considering he's only a 59 overall, so he's going to be available, especially considering what's above him. He's 24 years old, so not a ton of development left in front of him, but he does have reasonable athleticism, which a lot of people are going to be looking for with that 84 speed. With the fourth entry on this list, we're taking a look at the 49ers quarterbacks, and Jimmy G will be another plug-and-play type of a player. Doesn't have the athleticism of the other guys that I mentioned before, but he starts off with pretty good accuracy ratings, a 77 overall, so he could be a pretty reasonable plug-and-play starter for a team that is quarterback needy right now, like the Seattle Seahawks, for example. Trey Lance is probably not going anywhere, especially in franchise mode, but there have been talks that the 49ers don't absolutely love him as their quarterback. There are some conflicting reports, so that's interesting and something you want to keep an eye on at least. And then Brock Purdy is an interesting rookie prospect here. When you consider Trey Lance in front of him, they're going to have no need for Brock Purdy. Again, a player that's probably going to hit the free agent market or the practice squad at a 59 overall, 22 years old, and he does have 78 speed, so he's getting up there, you know, to the kind of serviceable athleticism level where you might be able to do a couple of different things with him instead of just having him be a one-dimensional quarterback. Next up, we would be a little bit crazy if we did not mention Jordan Love at this point. While he's only a 66 overall, he is still only 23 years old, and the team clearly still has Aaron Rodgers hanging around, so they don't necessarily have a need for Jordan Love right now, and he's going to waste away on that roster. He's a player that if you took him and started him on a different team, he could probably develop into a pretty solid quarterback, and so nonetheless, he has to be on this list. He has a pretty good combination between his athleticism, his age, his overall, so he's a really good candidate, and I know a lot of Packers users tend to utilize him as an early trade chip for teams that are quarterback needy. And then that brings us to the Panthers quarterback room, where you have a couple of options as well between veteran plug-and-play players like Baker Mayfield, who just arrived to the team, and a guy like Sam Darnold, who I feel like gets a bad rap and has not necessarily been put into the best situations, so he hasn't necessarily had a good chance to succeed. He is at that 25-year-old age mark, but depending on what this team decides to do, those guys are probably both available with the young Matt Corral behind him. If those two are starting, Matt Corral has some potential trade value to a team that could really use him. This is a really weird quarterback room. If you start a franchise with the Panthers, generally speaking, you're probably going to be looking to draft another quarterback in the future because a lot of people are not going to be super happy to have to develop Matt Corral, and that's something you could utilize yourself if you're not really looking to draft a quarterback in the offseason. So it's an interesting quarterback situation, a couple of names that you certainly want to be aware of anyway. My ultimate sleeper quarterback in Madden 23 is Bailey Zappi, whatever you want to call him. I thought he was genuinely going to be one of the best quarterbacks out of that draft class. I don't care what level of football you play at. If you can sling the football, you can sling the football, and this guy can sling the football. He's going to be a player that fits perfectly into a scheme like the Patriots, which is more of a dink and dunk type of an offense, a game manager quarterback. They're not asking a guy like that to do a ton, especially with Mac Jones on the rise in front of him. This is a guy that I like to come in and start for a team like the Seahawks or something like that. If he's going up against Geno Smith in a quarterback competition, I really think this guy could win that competition. I like him a lot. He's not going to be an athlete or anything of that nature, but at a 63 overall, 23 years old as a rookie, you could certainly snag him off of the Patriots. And yeah, I try to stay away from rookies most of the time on these lists, but it's hard not to with the quarterbacks because there are so few actual serviceable quarterbacks or quarterbacks that you could develop up to a serviceable level. And then a very surprising prospect here that I think people wouldn't have necessarily thought would be at where he's at is Tyler Huntley. I actually like Tyler Huntley as one of the top entrants on this list and certainly a top name to know. And it also kind of is worth keeping an eye on Lamar Jackson and what happens with that contract situation because that might result in him becoming available as well. But nonetheless, Tyler Huntley at 24 years old, a 68 overall, has fantastic athleticism at 87 speed. He also comes in at 86 throw power, which is pretty good for a 68 overall, all things considered. I think this is a very buildable player that has a few years ahead of him that are development worthy, and if you took him and started him in an offense, I think you could have a lot of success with this guy and get him up to a very, very effective quarterback for your team. I like this one a lot. He's definitely going to be a name that I'm keeping an eye on specifically if I want a quarterback in Madden 23. And then at the end of the actual teams list here, we have 3 teams at the very bottom of the team list that are going to have interesting quarterback situations that we're going to want to keep an eye on. Davis Mills had a step forward majorly in that first season for the Texans. He looks like he could be a good quarterback, but I could also see the Texans wanting to trade him away while his value's high and then drafting a quarterback to replace him. I mean, he's not the most stellar athlete. He's not going to have the biggest arm or anything like that, so certainly a player I want to keep my eye on. But more so than that, I want to keep my eye on a team like the Titans, who have a veteran, very solid quarterback in Ryan Tannehill and the young Malik Willis behind him. If you really want a hidden gem player, it's going to be that Malik Willis type of a player. Now, the thing that concerns me about picking up a Malik Willis is that he only has 43 awareness. So yeah, he does have that hyper speed at 92 speed at quarterback, 92 agility, 93 acceleration. That's fantastic. It's going to cost a lot to get him off of another team, especially another user. But he has 43 awareness, which is going to be near impossible possible to get up to a solid level. Now again, awareness, it seems to inflate ratings, but it also does seem to actively impact the way a player plays and actively impact how accurate a quarterback can be and things like that. So I would be cautious with the Malik Willis hype. I would be more so willing to look at some of the other prospects that we talked about on this list, but we certainly have to name these guys because one of them is potentially available because of the addition of Malik Willis. And then finally on that list, we go to the Vikings, who are in a pretty similar situation with Kirk Cousins and Kellen Mond. So Kellen Mond, 64 overall, 23 years old, 85 speed. Certainly not going to be the burner that we talked about with Malik Willis, but again, we have that 80 overall, pretty serviceable quarterback in front of him that you could potentially go out and get for cheap and add to your team as a plug-and-play bridge type of a player, or you could try to get Kellen Mond off of this team. If I'm taking over a franchise as the Vikings, I don't really love either of these options, so I'm potentially looking at quarterback early in the first round of the next draft anyway. So again, both of these players are probably going to be available to you in some capacity. And then for the final spot on this list, we're going to talk about a couple of quarterbacks in free agency, and specifically ones not to look at and one to definitely look at. So you might sort by age and see that Jamie Newman, Jake Fromm, and Cole McDonald are out here, but there's one clear choice out of these three players, and it's going to be Cole McDonald. He was definitely on this list last year, and he has to be included on this list this year. It's going to take a lot of development to get him up to a pretty serviceable overall, but I took him as a low 50s player last year and did well with him out the gate. And there's a reason for that. He has very good athleticism. He's got 85 speed, which just isn't going to be matched by the rest of the free agent class or most of the other quarterbacks available. The other thing that's not matched by anybody else is going to be his throw power. So when we talk about hidden gem quarterbacks and hidden gem players in general, we're looking at a lot of the physical attributes because we can build up the intangibles around those. Well, Jake Fromm might be the one that kind of tricks people because of his age and overall combination. At 24 years old, at 59 overall, looks a little bit better on paper than a 24-year-old 54 overall. The only problem is when you actually look at his ratings, he only has 82 throw power, which is really, really bad and something you definitely don't want on your team. However, Cole McDonald has one of the highest throw powers of any free agent quarterback, and of a lot of the players on this list, Cole McDonald actually has one of the higher throw powers compared to anybody else that I've told you about today. So yeah, his overall is low. He's going to start with very low accuracies, but you're going to be dealing with inaccuracy issues with anybody on this list, and getting that 88 throw power in conjunction with 85 speed is pretty darn good. So that's the list of hidden gem quarterbacks this year. There's not a lot going on here, unfortunately. There's not a lot you can take advantage of, but there are a couple of names that are certainly worth knowing in case you want to go in a route like this instead of trying to draft a quarterback or something of that nature. So with all that being said, I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, leave a like down below, subscribe if you have not, and comment as well. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.